Inhuman slaughter destroys a lost generation, turning its existence into a nightmare. The plot starts by showing a forest at dawn in Germany in 1917. The camera pans across a field strewn with bodies. Machine gun bursts plow the ground. German soldiers preparing to attack rise from their trenches under heavy fire. Some fall at once, the rest continue the offensive. Then the survivors begin to go through the pile of bodies. The killed are stripped of their uniforms, sending them off for cleaning and repair. Clothes are washed, dried, mended, and returned to the front line. It has yet to serve. The main character is young Paul. He rides his bicycle to the prom. His classmates signed up to volunteer for the front, but Paul's father refused to sign the authorization. The boy had to forge the signature to stay with his comrades. Before being sent off, the school principal inspires them with a speech, saying that they are the pride of the country and will soon be in Paris. The lads cheer joyfully. Soon the young men receive their uniforms. Paul is overjoyed, but notices someone else's name on the tag. The officer tears it off, saying that the previous owner of the uniform did not fit. Under the table is a pile of tags, evidence of the death of soldiers. In new uniforms, new recruits march joyfully to the front. Their faces are full of anticipation. The action moves to the north of France. The lieutenant is instructing Paul's squad right on the truck. The young men shout, "Welcome to Paris!" Suddenly, the truck is stopped by a medic. It is necessary to transport the wounded, so further will have to walk. Not far from the trenches, explosions are heard. The command to put on gas masks. Paul helps his comrade, but does not have time to do it himself, which is noticed by the commander. He orders to keep the masks on until lights out. It is raining at the positions. The commander takes off Paul's gas mask and tells him to draw water from the trench. Paul meets Koczynski, who shares his advice to warm his hands in his pants. As they scoop out the water, the classmates notice that the war looks very different from what they had imagined. At night, Paul and Kropp lead a patrol. The friends discuss how they will kill the first enemies. They are still full of optimism. When they hear a noise, they take aim, but it's only rats. Suddenly, Paul is hit by a shot. The bullet only grazes his helmet. The veteran advises not to stand still and change positions after each shot. The shelling begins, and the young men are ordered to take cover in the bunker. One of Paul's friends becomes hysterical. The artillery advances. The other recruit loses his temper and tries to leave the shelter, ignoring the order. Just as he steps outside, he is torn apart by an explosion. The bunker begins to subside. The commander gives the order to evacuate, but not everyone makes it out in time. Paul collects the tokens of the dead and notices the glasses, the same as his friends. The body lies nearby. The hero does not hold back his tears until a shout brings him back to reality. Later, the tokens are going through the headquarters, compiling lists of the dead. An official, who looks like a man capable of splitting even vigilantes, goes to Erzberger with a report on casualties. In occupied France, Paul and his comrades roll in a truck across a snow-covered field. Reaching the edge of a forest, he and Koczynski head toward a lonely farmhouse. The older man climbs over the fence, but they are spotted. Koczynski runs out with a goose under his arm, fleeing the owner's gunfire. Paul follows him. When they return, the soldiers have a feast, enjoying the fresh meat. Later, they notice peasant women, and Franz sets out to meet them. When the mail arrives, Koczynski receives a letter from his wife, which Paul reads aloud to him. It turns out that Koczynski had a son, but he died. During the night, Franz returns from his adventures. Paul reminds him that there is a search operation in the morning. Meanwhile, Erzberger moves toward the front lines, and Koczynski's squad scours the woods. They pass a sinkhole where they notice a body hanging from a tree. The soldiers reach a station where there was a gas attack earlier. Kropp reveals a poster with a picture of a woman. Paul discovers many bodies in a corner room, dead soldiers, a battalion of recruits made up of young men who had taken off their gas masks too soon. He informs the general that the French are preparing an offensive. The commander himself is against peace and is prepared to fight to the last soldier as reinforcements are expected soon. He orders a preemptive strike to be launched. At this time, Erzberger goes by train to Compiègne to negotiate an armistice. In the compartment, Erzberger is practicing his speech when the train comes to an abrupt stop. Koczynski's detachment is about to leave at night, and they are given orders to go to the front line. A convoy of trucks, cutting through the night with their headlights, moves along the road. Approaching the front line, the drivers turn off their headlights so as not to attract attention. The last few kilometers, the soldiers walk on foot, stretching in a long chain. The front line meets them with earth ramparts from explosions and cold fog. Expecting an attack, the soldiers tensely watch through the sights with a heavy heart when the French invite a delegation of Erzberger to negotiate with Marshal Foch. He welcomes the Germans, but wants them to ask for an armistice themselves, as they need it much more. When Erzberger makes the request, the Marshal holds out to him a folder with a document outlining the terms of the armistice. The Germans have 3 days to unconditionally accept these terms. During this time, the fighting will not stop. If Erzberger wants to stop the bloodshed, he can sign the document right now. At this time, a command arrives at the front, and the soldiers are sent to attack. One by one, they run out of the trenches, running towards the fire, falling into mud and puddles. Before Paul's eyes, an explosion kills a sergeant running in front of him. The enemy machine guns destroy the German soldiers, but the attack does not lose its strength. Some manage to get closer to the enemy, including Paul. Paul throws a grenade into the trench and runs to kill the enemy. His comrades, having broken through, start mopping up the trenches, throw grenades into the dugouts, and perform all the necessary actions. Paul has to kill a young Frenchman with a sapper shovel. Cleaning the area, he finds trophies and replenishes his supplies. Suddenly the ground begins to shake, scaring even the rats. The Germans, having captured the fortifications, are preparing for defense when tanks, the latest weapon, appear. Rifle and machine gun fire cannot stop the tanks. Their tracks slowly destroy everything in their path, bringing the inevitable defeat closer. The return fire of the tank guns forces the Germans to lie down in the trenches. Some of the soldiers, realizing what to do, begin to retreat. Tanks drive through the trenches, crushing everything in their path. As the tanks pass, Paul's squad moves in behind, splitting up in panic. They manage to blow up a tank with a grenade, and then throw another grenade into a machine gun nest. Behind the vehicles, flamethrowers reach the trenches and burn the Germans who were still in the trenches. The squad opens fire but soon retreats. Paul returns, but is thrown back by an explosion. He regains consciousness and sees the French burning alive a surrendering German. At this time, the Erzberger delegation is discussing the terms of the armistice, which effectively represent Germany's surrender. However, the situation at the front is such that there is no choice. Erzberger orders a copy of the document to be sent to the government for consent. Paul is running around a field with other soldiers when they begin to be attacked by enemy biplanes firing machine gun fire at them. He falls into a huge crater and is left lying at the bottom of it with a knife in his hand. He sees a French soldier aiming at him, but the explosion throws him right back into the same crater. Paul runs up to him and, without waiting, kills him with the knife. They both lie next to each other, one dead, the other dying of bleeding. Paul tries not to listen to the dying man's wheezing and crawls away, picking up his helmet on a stick, which is immediately knocked off by the shot. After catching his breath, Paul tries to help the wounded man by cutting his overcoat with a knife and treating the wound. But his efforts are in vain, and the Frenchman dies in his arms. In his pocket, Paul finds a photo of the dead man's family, which increases his feelings of guilt. He takes the dead man's papers so that he can later find his wife and confess that he was the cause of her husband's death. Erzberger receives a response from the government. He receives orders to make peace despite the harsh conditions. Paul, having got out of the battlefield, sees the soldiers celebrating the end of the war. But the hero does not feel joy. He goes to the infirmary to find his platoon. He finds a wounded comrade, comforts him, and the latter hands him a woman's handkerchief, the trophy of the dead Lavellas. In the kitchen, Paul encounters Koczynski, who argues with the cook. They carry food to a wounded comrade, but the latter takes advantage of the moment and kills himself with a fork. The friends try to stop the bleeding and call a doctor, but the comrade dies, not wanting to become an invalid. Left with Koczynski, Paul reveals that his parents were against him participating in the war and speculates on how to move on with his life after his experiences. Koczynski, however, is not in a philosophical mood. In the agon of Marshal Foch, the highest military officers of France and a delegation of Erzberger gather. Foch remains adamant, despite his opponent's attempts to persuade him. Erzberger is forced to concede and signs the document, accepting all conditions. The armistice goes into effect at 11 a.m. on November 11th. While the soldiers celebrate, the German general feels the bitterness of defeat, perceiving what is happening as a personal failure. He gives orders to round up new recruits in the morning. At dawn on November 11th, Koczynski observes the broken window. The silence, to which he has long been accustomed, seems unfamiliar. There is no shooting. The cannonade no longer rumbles. Together with Paul, he goes in search of food, discussing Christmas plans along the way. Upon reaching the farm, Koczynski helps his friend get inside to steal provisions. Paul fills his pockets with eggs, but suddenly notices the owner's son at the door, who instantly locks him in the barn. Breaking down the door, Paul rushes away, and the enraged farmer shoots after him, but to no avail. In the process of fleeing, all the eggs are broken. The soldiers collect the liquid leaking from the clothes and immediately drink it. Meanwhile, Koczynski, who has decided to go into seclusion, enjoys the unaccustomed silence. However, a sudden sound behind him alarms him. A boy with his father's gun is standing in front of him. Paul hears a shot and rushes to his comrade, finding him wounded in the stomach. He takes Koczynski in his arms and tries to get him to the medics, but the journey proves to be too long. Truckloads of enthusiastic soldiers catch up with them, but no one agrees to help. Paul has to carry his weakened friend by himself. When he reaches the infirmary, he learns the terrible news that Koczynski is already dead. In despair, Paul tries to bring him to his senses, but all in vain. While he is experiencing the loss, the general gathers new recruits at his residence. He orders an attack on the French positions before the armistice takes effect. One of the soldiers refuses to fight, for which he immediately receives a death sentence and is shot. The others, having obeyed, are sent into battle. It is 15 minutes before 11 o'clock when the German soldiers prepare to attack. At that time, the French are already celebrating the end of the war, rejoicing at the imminent peace. In the morning fog, the Germans quietly approach the fortifications, then go on the offensive. Their battle cry spreads across the field, and the French urgently occupy the defense. Machine gun fire mows down the soldiers around Paul. He hides behind a fallen horse, but a grenade falls nearby. The hero quickly throws it back. The fight continues, and Paul kills several enemies, while saving a young recruit who has just recently found himself at the front. He is nearly drowned in the mud, but manages to break free. In the heat of battle, he is knocked down and falls into a dugout, where he is hit in the back with a bayonet. Blood stains his chest, and his breathing becomes heavy. At that moment, the ceasefire order sounds. The war is over. Paul, rising from the last strength, goes out into the light. As he climbs the stairs, he notices the wind blowing the ashes away. His gaze falls on the recently hung poster. As the clock strikes 11, the troops disperse, taking the wounded. The sergeant orders Junts to collect the identification tags of the dead. Among them is Paul's badge. The final shots are accompanied by background information. During the 4 years of the war, the front line in the West remained virtually unchanged, despite the deaths of more than 3 million people.